Hi everyone, Jessica here from Paper Ink Stamp and welcome back to another card making video. So today we are going to be revisiting one of the older issues of Simply Cards and Papercraft again, just like we did in the last video. This is, I believe it's issue 200, so it's a little while ago, and this is a really beautiful Altenew set. This comes with some layering stamps, it's got a sentiment in there, and then it's also got 2 dies as well. With everything that's been going on at the moment, there is a backlog or an issue, I'm not sure what it is, with the newer issues. We're not getting them quite as frequent at the moment. I was hoping that we were going to get the newest issue really today, because I'm sure it goes on sale tomorrow, so I thought being a subscriber I might have gotten it a little bit early, but hopefully we'll be able to get that issue in time for Sunday's video. But for now, like I said, I'm going to revisit a couple of the older issues. So in the last video, I did use a previous Simply Cards and Papercraft issue to make a card, and you guys seem to really like going back and looking at the products that you've already got and use them in different ways. And the real great thing now about revisiting magazines that we got quite a while ago is we've all got new products to use with this to create different kinds of cards, have different ideas. So it's great to see how you can use it now versus sort of how you used it back then. I'll pop a link to the first video that I created using this stamp set. That was back in the very early videos that I created for my channel, so I will pop a link to that video if you want to go and check it out. I did really love the cards actually that I created back then. It was quite a lot of work because I did a lot of stamping and masking, but I think they came out really great, so I'll pop a link to that video. But now let's get into creating the card for today's video. So you can see as I've been talking that I have been stamping out this one die. So for this particular image you get 2 stamps in here. So you get this first one, which is the outline of the image with a little bit of detail in the center, and then the second stamp you get is solid, so it is a layering stamp set, and this then allows you to add some really great color to this flower. It's not a full coverage, but it gives a really beautiful look. So I'm creating a slimline card today, so I'm not sure how many of these I want, but I want to make sure that I've got enough variety. So you can see that I've stamped out 8 of these. I'm stamping this in VersaFine Onyx Black ink. So again, because we're not going to be using any alcohol markers, anything like that, I'm using this particular ink. And we're going to add the colour using the Prism World of Colour ink pads with then that solid stamp. But what I'm also going to do is add some leaves. So again, there's 2 stamps in here to create a layered leaf. So it's got 2 leaves on this stamp that you can see here. And then again, it's got that second solid stamp, which is going to add that colour. So even though these are layering stamps, if you didn't want to use that second stamp to add colour, of course you could just use any colouring medium, alcohol markers, watercolour pencils, things like that. But alternatively, the idea of these kind of layering stamps is that you can just use coloured ink. So if you're not interested in colouring in any way and you've got coloured ink pads, these are going to be perfect for you. And I think Altenew are really great at creating stamps like this that don't require colouring if that's not what you're interested in. So you can see that I've stamped out just a whole bunch of leaves as well. Like I said, I just want to make sure that I've got enough when I come to create my card. I don't want to have to come back and restamp if I need some more. Of course I can, but ideally I'd rather overstamp than understamp. So now we've got our outlines stamped, or we can go ahead and use that solid stamp to now add the colour. This is really the fun bit. So I'm using my Prism World of Colour inks because I have a really great variety of colours. I don't want all of my leaves to be the same colour green, and I want to make sure that I've got some nice variety in the flowers as well. So I'm going to use a different colour for each one of those flowers. So I did find that these are really easy to line up with. You'll notice that I'm not using my stamping platform. Normally when it comes to layering stamps or just stamping in general really, when I want to make sure that I get a really good clean stamp, I'll use my stamping platform, but you don't always have to. It is quite easy to eyeball out. But the one thing you'll notice is, like I said before, it doesn't give you a full colour coverage. It does leave some white areas in there, so it's a lot more forgiving than if it was colouring in the whole image, and I really like that about this set. The other thing you'll notice is, like I showed you in my previous video, I think it was, and I mentioned about having lots of comments about people saying to just leave the stamp down on the paper for a couple seconds just to really help absorb that colour, and I have been trying to do that a little bit more to see whether I get better results that way. If I was to do this again, I would probably have used my stamping platform maybe if I wanted more solid colours, because I probably would have double stamped. But I am still happy with the results that I got using the acrylic block, and I'll be honest, it does make things so much easier using an acrylic block, because I don't have to keep wiping my stamp off and then moving it and then sort of closing the lid back on my stamping platform. So as much as I love it, it is a lot easier to use an acrylic block, but I find that you'll get a better coverage because you can double stamp and you can get just a more solid stamp. So hopefully that makes sense to you guys. It's kind of the pros and cons really between using a stamping platform and using an acrylic block, but I'm still happy with the results that I got here today. So I'm just going to speed this up a little bit because I am pretty much just doing the same thing over and over again. But you can see that I've picked out a few different colours for my leaves, and this is what's really great about these Prism ink pads, is the price of the full set is relatively inexpensive in comparison to other brands, and it means then that you just get a real great variety of colours. So you've seen me reorganise my ink pads into these like little plastic cases by Hunky Dory, and it's made such a difference because you can see all of the colours that you've got and really pick the colour that you want. But it really just goes to show sort of the great variety that this stamp set has. So if you are maybe a beginner looking to get a fuller set so you have just better variety, I would really recommend these ink pads because I do think they are really great. But you can see that I'm just stamping then this bold second stamp for the flowers. And again, there's little sections that you're able to kind of line up and make it so much easier. So it's got just a little sharp kind of flick at the bottom, and you're just really easily able to sort of line that up. But again, because it is not a full stamp, it's not colouring in the whole image, it is so much more forgiving if you don't quite stamp it perfectly. But it's really easy. Once you've done it once, it's so easy to do. So now we've got all of the stamping completed, I'm just going to leave this to sit a sec while I just tidy up my desk, and then I'm going to run this through my Gemini die cut machine with the coordinating dies that came with the free gift. So because there's only one die for each of the flower and the leaves, I have to run this through literally one at a time. So it is quite time consuming to cut all of these. I do need to get a new mat for my Brother Scan and Cut machine. I'm hoping to do a video on using my Scan and Cut machine to actually cut out stamped images like this and just show you guys why it's an investment to buy a Brother Scan and Cut or something like a Cricut, but it's really, really fantastic if you don't have coordinating dies, or if you're doing a project like this where you've only got one die and you need to cut it multiple times. It saves so much time, and it would save money on buying coordinating dies. But for now, we've run it through the die cut machine. We can see we've got all of our pieces here, and now we're going to look at creating the background for our card. So I wanted to add something a little bit more interesting to the background. So what I'm going to be doing is die cutting a bunch of hexagons from some of the Craft Perfect cardstock that I picked up in that recent haul video that I shared with you. So the colours that I've picked to use is raspberry pink, spearmint green, mustard yellow and bubblegum pink. And what I'm going to do is I'm taking either scraps from the cardstock, or I'm just going to be cutting a slither from the packs, and then I'm going to be die cutting 2 hexagons from each sheet. So once I'd cut all of these hexagons out, I sat and played around with the position of them a little bit. I didn't want to have them covering the entire background. I wanted to have kind of like a random style look to the background. A lot of it you don't kind of see by the time we add the flowers, but you get really nice little hints in the background. So you can see to the side, I've got kind of my rough placements of the colours. I don't want to have too many of them sort of too next to each other. But what I'm going to do for this very first one, I'm going to use my T-square ruler just to help me line that one up. And I'm actually going to be using some liquid glue. I'm trying to use a little bit more liquid glue just to sort of see how I feel about it as an adhesive of choice. Normally you see that I use double-sided tape or I use my tape runner, but I thought I'd give this glue just a little bit more of a play, and just sort of see how much I kind of like it. But what I do end up doing, just to make sure that it stays flat, is I am putting my acrylic block on top of it. And then once I'm putting my second hexagon down, then again I'm just moving that acrylic block just to kind of help adhere that onto my panel. So the card panel that I'm using here, this is roughly, I think it's about 3 inch by just shy of 8 inch. I am going to mat and layer this as well, but my finished card ends up being 4 inch by just over 8.5 inch. So it's quite a large slimline card, but I think that works really great with the size of the flowers, because I do end up having them sort of hang over a little bit. I think it comes out really nicely. I really love how this background's turned out. I love how all the colours work really nicely together. I think it's a really great combination. But you can see that I've added the acrylic blocks just to help hold those hexagons down and help that glue dry flat and keep them flat. And what I'm going to do in the meantime is I'm going to add a little bit of shape to my flowers just while I let this sit and dry. So you can get proper shaping tools. It's those tools that you have that's got the ball on the end of it, and then it comes with like a foam pad as well for you to be able to do this. I don't have any of that, but there's always ways of using things in your craft room that will give you that same effect. So I'm literally just using a microfiber cloth, and I'm using my craft knife. The cap on it is circular, so it's acting like a ball, like one of those ball tools. So literally all I'm doing is just pressing that into the card. So you can see I'm kind of going in a circular motion, and I'm just working my way around, and I'm trying to alternate between having the petals curling up and then having the whole flower curling down. So I'm either doing this on the back or on the front, just depends what kind of look you want. I decided to go for a mixture of both just to give a little bit more interest to the card. But you can see that all I'm doing is just rubbing the end of my lid over the flower itself. Once you do this, it will start curling it in. Because the petals on the flowers aren't completely separate, the image is quite a solid image, they're not going to totally curl up on themselves, but it does add, again, some really great dimension to the card. And you can see I'm just doing the exact same thing with the leaves as well. So this isn't something that I've ever really done, I don't think, with any flower images in the past, but recently I did watch a video that Tim Holtz posted on YouTube, and it was showing a new product of his with Sizzix, and it was shaping in tools, and he was kind of using his own flower products as well to sort of show you how you can shape and things like that. And I thought I would give it a go, and again, I don't have the right tools for this, but you can always find something in your craft room or in your home that will kind of do the same thing. And I really love how these have come out. I think this is definitely something I need to kind of remember to do, because like I said, it just adds some really great dimension to your project. So now we've got our flowers and our leaves shaped, and we've allowed then our hexagons to sit and let that glue dry back. We can start putting our card together. The first thing we're going to do is trim down this panel, so get rid of that those excess pieces of hexagons. Then we're going to add our mat and layers first, and then we can go ahead and pop our flowers on. So for my layers, for the hexagon panel, I added some double-sided tape and adhered that onto a mat and layer of Oyster grey cardstock from that Craft Perfect range. Then I've added some foam pads onto the back of this, and then I'm going to pop this onto my card base. And you can see it's got that really beautiful white border around the outside. I wanted to have it just a little bit thicker, just because I like the look of having a thicker white border. And now we can get started adding on our flowers. So I spent a little bit of time working out how I wanted to arrange my flowers on the card. I didn't want to cover too much of these coloured hexagons. I didn't want to have too much white gap. So once I'd worked out where exactly I wanted them to be, I just sort of slid them to the side, and then I can go and kind of follow where I'd laid them out. For the flowers that are curled into themselves, I'm using liquid glue. And then for the flowers that are curved kind of back on themselves, because we've created that kind of dimension where they're going to stand away from the card, I'm going to use a couple of foam pads in here. And that's just going to help keep that sort of a dimension of it leaning back on itself. Hopefully that makes sense. But what I'm going to be doing is kind of snaking these down the card. Like I said, I want to cover up some of that white gap. And I'm just going to kind of just arrange these sort of, some of them are going to be on top of others. We're going to have a couple of them that are kind of curved the same way next to each other. So we want it to be just a little bit more kind of organic. The other thing I tried to do as well is just have them hanging off the panels, not where they hung outside of the perimeter of the card itself, but just where they overhang over the mats and layers. I think that just gives it such a beautiful look, like they're really kind of coming off the page. I then also added the leaves as well, so in exactly the same way, any of them that were sort of curved up, I used the liquid glue, and then any of the ones that were sort of curved back on themselves, I just used a foam square. And again, I'm just using these to fill in a few of the white gaps, a few of the gaps in between the flowers, and I do think it makes such a big difference adding those adding the leaves in with the flowers. It just makes it look a little bit more realistic, and I think it just sort of finishes it and grinds it really, really nicely. Within this stamp set, there is an additional tiny stamp that will add colour to the very centres of the flowers. I decided not to use these, and I actually then made use of all of the new Nuvo crystal drops that I bought, because I've got quite a variety, as I showed you. And I picked out, I didn't have the exact colour for each one of these, but I picked out the colours that I thought would go best with those flowers. And then I added a drop to that centrepiece to cover that white section, but also, again, just to add a little bit of fun embellishment. So you can see that I'm literally going in and I'm just adding a small dot. And for the majority of these, they actually went really nicely. Some of them matched really well, but others, I just tried to sort of pick the colours that kind of looked similar. So I didn't have an orange, but I used kind of the sort of goldy colour that I had, and I think it looked really nice. So it just kind of finished those off. Like I said, you could use that stamp in there to add that colour. You could just add a bit of colour with like an alcohol marker or a watercolour, you know, whatever kind of mediums you have. But I thought it would be nice, like I said, just to add a little bit of embellishment. And the other thing I did as well is took some of the Morning Dew, which is the clear drop, and added those, just dotted them around the flowers themselves. Again, just add an extra little bit of embellishment. And then all we've got left to do is just add a sentiment. There is only one sentiment that comes with this stamp set, and it reads "Sending love and hugs." So I'm going to use that because it's really quite small, and I thought it was going to fit really nicely actually on our card. So I'm going to heat emboss this with some white embossing powder. I've used some raspberry pink cardstock. So I've used my Versamark clear ink pad, and then I'm going to use this Sweet Dixie Glacier white embossing powder, and then we can go ahead and heat set that, and that white is going to show it really beautifully on the raspberry pink cardstock. And I picked this colour because I felt like there wasn't too much of this showing. I wanted it to match in with the background. I didn't want to use black or something that I hadn't used on the card already, and I thought this was one of the colours that you couldn't see too much of, and I thought it would then, like I said, go really nicely with that white embossing powder. So once I'd heat set this, I did then fussy cut this right up to close to the letters. I didn't want to have like a big chunky sentiment here, you know, big square. I wanted it to be quite small and delicate because we've got a lot going on here. And then it so happened that we had this really nice space for this sentiment. When I was sort of thinking about my layout, I didn't actually think about where I was going to put my sentiment, but it was just so happened that we had this really nice gap that fitted our sentiment perfectly. And I did have to take this back off and straighten it up, and then in doing that, I dropped the sentiment right into a couple of those Nuvo drops. So I just reapplied those, and you can see where I've added then those clear Morning Dew Nuvo drops. And then that is our card finished. I really, really love how this card has come out. I love all of the elements have come together really, really nicely. There is a lot going on, but I think it just works so well together. And I'm actually really pleased that I've gone back to look at some of the older magazines and the free gifts that came with them, because it's so nice to see, like I said at the beginning, what kind of cards you can create using the products that you've already got that you had a long time ago, and kind of compare it to how you used it back then. So that is it for today's video. So I hope you've enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed actually making the card itself. If you did like it, please give this video a thumbs up and leave me a comment down below. If you haven't subscribed to my channel already, please hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you're notified whenever I upload a new video. So that's it for today. Thanks for watching and happy crafting.